In the sprawling, neon-drenched metropolis of Xylos, a city that scraped the heavens with spires of chrome and light, humanity was little more than forgotten dust. They were the refugees, the unwanted flotsam of a lost war, living in the shadows of a galactic empire that barely acknowledged their existence. They were ghosts haunting the lower levels, their stories untold, their struggles unseen. And in the deepest, coldest alley of this city, a 16-year-old boy named Kael, who believed he had nothing left to lose, was about to prove that even in the darkest corners of the universe, the brightest sparks are often human. The wind in Sector Gamma 9 had teeth. It was a living thing, born in the polluted canyons between megastructures, and it gnawed through Kael's threadbare jacket with relentless hunger. Above, the sky was a tapestry of advertisements and traffic. Hovercrafts streaming between crystalline towers like luminous rivers. Their occupants, safe in their climate-controlled bubbles, were as distant as the stars. Kael's world was this alley, a grimy niche between a defunct nutrient paste dispenser caked in rust and a humming power conduit that offered the most pathetic warmth imaginable. His stomach was a hollow ache, a familiar companion. He'd spent the day trying to find work on the loading docks, only to be pushed aside by hulking alien laborers who saw him as vermin. Survival was a game of inches and moments, and he was losing. He had only one thing of value. Not a weapon, not a stash of credits. It was a blanket, a thick thermo-weave cloak that had been his mother's. He remembered the day she gave it to him, her hands chapped and thin, but her eyes full of a fierce love that defied their squalid refugee transport. "It will keep you warm when I can't," she'd said, her voice a fragile whisper. The fabric, though worn, still held the faint scent of home and an advanced technology that trapped and amplified body heat. It was his last connection to a life he barely remembered, and the only thing separating him from a frozen, forgotten end. As he prepared to wrap himself in its life-saving warmth, a sound cut through the howl of the wind. A wet, ragged gasp. Kael froze, every muscle tensing. His mind, a fortress built on 3 years of brutal survival, screamed its cardinal rules. Be invisible. Be silent. Run. Hide. Ignore it. Trouble in the Undercity was a predator, and making yourself known was an invitation to be devoured. But the sound came again, a desperate liquid rattle that spoke not of a drunken brawl, but of a life guttering out like a cheap candle. Against his better judgment, he crept deeper into the shadows, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. There, slumped against a waste reclamation unit, was a figure that made his blood run cold. It was a Xylorian, one of the city's masters. Tall, encased in jagged obsidian armor that seemed to drink the dim light, with skin the color of twilight stone. The Xylorians were a warrior race, forged on a death world of relentless gravity and savage fauna. They were known for their rigid code of honor and their utter disdain for the lesser species that scurried in their city's depths. Kael had been on the receiving end of that disdain more times than he could count. And this one was dying. A nasty plasma wound wept violet blood from a breach in his side, his formidable armor powerless against the seeping cold that was finishing the job. Kael's eyes, trained to notice details, saw the insignia on his shoulder plate, a sigil of high command. This wasn't just any warrior. This was someone important. A bitter, angry thought surfaced. Good. Let him die. Let one of them feel the cold helplessness he felt every single day. Every rational thought told Kael to walk away. This soldier would have sooner stepped on him than acknowledged him. Helping him was a risk with no reward. But then the Xylorian shivered, a violent, uncontrollable tremor that shook his massive frame. It was a shudder of life on the precipice of death, a vulnerability that transcended species. In that moment, he wasn't an arrogant conqueror. He was just a living being, losing a battle against the cold. Just like Kael. Damn it. The word was a silent curse, aimed at his own weakness, at the stubborn ember of humanity he couldn't seem to extinguish. With a surge of defiance against his own survival instincts, Kael unfolded his mother's cloak. He hesitated for only a heartbeat, the warmth of the fabric a painful memory against his skin. Then he gently draped the warm, heavy cloak over the wounded alien, tucking it around his broad shoulders. The contrast was stark, the soft, worn weave against the hard, cold armor. The Xylorian's eyes, burning silver like twin novas, fluttered open. They focused on Kael, confusion and disbelief warring in their depths. His hand twitched towards the pulse rifle beside him. "Easy," Kyle whispered, raising his hands. I'm not going to hurt you." The alien's gaze fell to the cloak, then back to the shivering human boy who had just given away his only source of warmth and life. He saw no cunning, no trickery in the boy's gray eyes, only a strange, illogical act of compassion. Before his eyes closed, the warrior's fingers fumbled at his belt, pressing a small, hidden plate. A silent, subvocal distress call. Then his consciousness faded, his breathing becoming a fraction less ragged under the impossible warmth of the human artifact. Kael huddled against the opposite wall, the cold seeping into his bones with a vengeance. He watched over the alien warrior, a silent, lonely vigil in a forgotten alley. He didn't know if the Xylorian would survive the night. He didn't know if he would. But as exhaustion finally claimed him, pulling him into a fitful, freezing sleep, he felt something other than fear. A flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with a blanket. Kael awoke not to the cold, but to silence. An unnatural, heavy, and absolute silence that smothered the alley. The ever-present hum of the city was gone. He opened his eyes and his world tilted on its axis. He was surrounded. 200 Xylorian warriors stood in perfect, silent formation, their obsidian armor absorbing the dim light. They formed a perfect, inescapable perimeter, their disciplined presence a wall of impending death. Pulse rifles were held at a low ready, and 200 pairs of silver eyes were fixed on him. Fear, cold, and absolute seized Kael. This was it. A catastrophic miscalculation. He'd helped one, and they thought he'd hurt him. He was going to die for a moment of stupid weakness. A path parted through the warriors, and a towering Xylorian approached. His armor was more ornate, etched with lines of command. His presence so immense it felt like a gravitational field. This was a leader. He stopped directly in front of Kael, who was still on the ground, too terrified to move. But the warrior didn't raise his weapon. Instead, in a movement that was both fluid and shocking, he knelt. His armored knee crunched on the grimy pavement, a gesture so profound, so utterly alien for this proud race, that it shattered Kael's fear and replaced it with sheer, dumbfounded bewilderment. "You are the human, Kael." The commander's voice was like grinding stones, yet it held no menace. It was a statement of fact, imbued with a deep, unsettling reverence. From behind him, 2 warriors brought forward the alien Kael had saved. He was on his feet now, his wound treated and sealed with shimmering biogel. He looked at Kael, and for the first time, Kael saw a clear emotion on a Xylorian face. Profound, unadulterated gratitude. The commander Kael had saved stepped forward, holding the thermo-weave cloak. It was folded with a military precision that would have made his mother proud. "You gave your only protection to a stranger," the warrior said, his voice resonating with awe. "To an enemy, by the reckoning of many. You performed an act of honor when no law or code demanded it. Our philosophy is built on a code of action. We do what is required. You did what was right, without compulsion. You have shamed us all with your compassion." Wait, what? Shamed them? Is that a good thing? This whole warrior culture thing is way more complicated than the anti-human graffiti suggested. The lead commander rose to his full, intimidating height. "I am High Lord Vorlag. The warrior you saved is my son, Commander Tyrex. He was ambushed by Scorn assassins, our blood rivals who operate without honor. You did not just save a soldier. You saved the future of my clan, the heir to my command." Vorlaj gestured. The 200 warriors moved as one, slamming their fists over their hearts in a resounding salute. The sound was like a single seismic heartbeat echoing off the skyscrapers above. And it was directed not to their commanders, but to Kael. "A debt has been incurred," Vorlag declared, his voice booming with authority. "The Xylorian code is absolute. A life debt is the most sacred bond. It cannot go unpaid. You are no longer an outcast human. You are under the protection of Clan Vorlag. You will have food, shelter. You will have a place with us. Kyle was speechless. Just yesterday, he was less than nothing. Now, a legion of the galaxy's most feared warriors was pledging allegiance to him. The sheer whiplash was staggering. Excitement, a feeling he hadn't truly felt in years, began to bubble up inside him, pushing out the cold and the fear. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. A shadow fell over Commander Tyrex's face as he stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Father," he said, his voice urgent and sharp. "The scorn. The ambush was a distraction. My mission was to uncover their true plan. They have hidden a cascading quantum explosive somewhere in the Undercity. It's designed to trigger a chain reaction in the geothermal vents, a weapon that will not just destroy this sector, but destabilize the entire city's foundation, sending it plunging into the abyss." Panic, a rare sight, flared in Vorlag's silver eyes. "We have scoured the energy grid, but the Undercity is a maze we do not know. Our maps are useless down here. We cannot find it." All eyes, 200 pairs of burning silver orbs, fell upon Kael. The boy who knew the alleys. The boy who knew the shadows. The boy who knew the forgotten ways where maps and technology were meaningless. The weight of their gaze was heavier than any skyscraper. They hadn't just offered him a home. They had given him a responsibility that could save or doom millions. And from the grim look on Tyrex's face, the clock was ticking very, very fast. There is no fear quite like the fear of failure when the stakes are an entire city. But Kael had lived with fear as a constant companion. He knew its weight, its taste. He knew how to use it, how to turn it into fuel. He took a breath, the cold air steadying him. "I know the way," Kael said, his voice quiet but firm, shocking even himself with its newfound authority. The next few hours were a blur. Kael was taken to a mobile command center, a place of humming consoles and holographic maps that were utterly failing to depict the reality of the Undercity. He saw the panic and frustration on the faces of the Xylorian tacticians. Then, stepping forward, he placed his hand on the console and swiped the official maps away. "Your maps are wrong," he stated. "They show streets. The Undercity isn't streets. It's layers. It's secrets." Using the controls, he began to sketch, drawing lines that didn't exist on any chart. "You need to get to the central power hub. Your routes are suicide. They're kill zones. But there's another way." For the first time, a Xylorian High Lord deferred to a human child. Kael became something he never imagined, a leader. He guided a strike team of 20 elite Xylorian warriors, including Tyrex, through the labyrinthine depths. He led them not through streets, but through rusted sewer conduits where the dripping water sizzled from leaking power lines, through abandoned maglev tunnels that groaned under the weight of the city above, and through vertical maintenance shafts that made the hardened, gravity-conditioned warriors nervous. These were paths of scavengers and survivors, invisible to the high-tech scans of the Scorn. The Scorn will have guarded the main access points to the primary power conduits. Kael explained, his voice echoing in a vast, dark cistern. "But they won't expect anyone to come through the old atmospheric processors. The network is unstable, but it will take us right under their feet." Tyrex watched Kael with growing respect. This small, fragile human possessed a tactical brilliance born not of training, but of pure survival. He saw the city not as a grid of streets, but as a living, breathing entity with arteries and veins that only he could navigate. They finally reached their target, the central power distribution hub for the lower sectors. And just as Kael predicted, the Scorn were there, their sickly green armor a stark contrast to the Xylorians' obsidian black. The final device, a pulsating orb of malevolent energy, was wired directly into the primary power core, a countdown timer on its surface reading less than 10 minutes. The battle was immediate and brutal. Plasma bolts lit up the cavernous space as the two warrior clans clashed. The Xylorians were powerful, but the Scorn were entrenched and desperate, fighting with a fanaticism that bordered on insanity. Urgency propelled Kael. While the warriors fought, he and Tyrex pushed towards the bomb. A Scorn operative, however, had anticipated them, activating a localized energy shield around the explosive. I cannot breach it, Tyrex roared, his plasma shots dissipating harmlessly against the shimmering barrier. It's drawing too much power from the core. And that's when Kael's street smarts saw what a warrior's eyes could not. He wasn't looking at the shield. He was looking at the decades-old, corroded conduits feeding it. He recognized the markings from a time he'd almost electrocuted himself trying to tap them for heat. It's not stable, Kael yelled over the chaos. That shield is drawing power through the auxiliary lines. They're old, they can't handle a surge. He pointed to an emergency coolant release valve on a nearby wall, a massive rusted lever, a relic from a bygone era. Overload it. Flush the coolant system. It will short the entire auxiliary grid. Tyrex stared at him, then at the valve. It was a move of desperation, a crude, brutish tactic in an age of energy weapons. But he trusted the human. Do it. As Tyrex laid down a storm of covering fire, Kael scrambled to the wall, his hands finding purchase on the massive lever. With a desperate feral yell born of years of frustration and helplessness, he wrenched it down. Alarms blared as gallons of supercooled fluid erupted into the auxiliary conduits. The lights flickered violently, and with a deafening crackle of energy, the Scorn's shield collapsed in a shower of sparks. In that moment of shock, the Xylorian warriors pressed their advantage, overwhelming the remaining Scorn. Tyrex leaped to the device and, with practiced precision, ripped out its core components, disarming it with only seconds to spare. Silence descended, broken only by the hum of the power core and the ragged breaths of the survivors. Kael stood on the bridge of High Lord Vorlag's flagship, the Indomitable Will. Below him, the city of Xylos glittered, safe and whole. His old, tattered jacket was gone, replaced by a simple but well-made uniform in the dark gray of Clan Vorlag. Draped over his shoulders, a symbol of the highest honor, was his mother's cloak, now repaired and cleaned, its fibers seeming to shine. Tyrex stood beside him, no longer just a commander he had saved, but a brother forged in battle and coolant fluid. The High Council does not understand, Tyrex said, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. They cannot comprehend how a homeless human, with nothing to gain, could change the course of a war. They speak of strategy, of tactics, but they do not understand your strength. Kael looked at his reflection in the viewport. He saw not a frightened, starving boy, but a young man who had found his place among the stars, not as a conqueror, but as a guide. It's not that complicated, Kael said, a small, genuine smile on his face. When someone is down, and you have the power to help them, you help them up. It's the most human thing in the universe. And sometimes it's also the most powerful. The Xylorians had offered him a home, a future, a family. But Kael had given them something far more valuable in return. A lesson that true honor is not found in a rigid code written in stone, but in the selfless, illogical, and universe-shaking power of compassion. A lesson that would now be taught to a generation of warriors, forever changing their destiny, all because of one boy, one blanket, and one cold, lonely night.